such as grew up in England, Switzerland, Israel, New York City, education at Columbia, then Dartmouth, then Harvard Medical School, then Columbia again, School of Public Health to get his MPH. He then did training in pediatric health and was chief resident at Bronx Municipal Hospital Center. And he was a clinical fellow in pediatrics at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Family heritage. His mother was British. His father was Hungarian, a Jewish anti-Nazi journalist who fled to England in 1939. And the rest is history. Cherished possession, an 1855 book by German hygienist Max von Pettenkofer, with notes in the margin by London medical officer John Simon. Both were dead wrong about how cholera was transmitted. And then, although he would likely balk at such a comparison, Paneth seems to embody several of the characteristics he so admires in John Snow. An ability to see the forest for the trees, unconventional thinking, cross-disciplinary training, and a preference for research that can be readily applied. And so says Nigel Paneth, I'm not interested in research that just finds out enjoyable things to learn. With that introduction, we're going to turn this over to Professor Paneth and let's listen to his words of valediction and learn. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Jim. And it was really, I had no plans to give such a talk, but Jim persuaded me that I should say something as I approach retirement, which I think is going to take place officially in like 5 or 6 days. And I want to, but he persuaded me it might be useful. And so, okay. I want to give some caveats. First of all, this is much more au revoir than adieu. In other words, although it says farewell, I'm actually not going anywhere. I will become a part-time faculty member paid on my grants. So I'm still around. I have 5 graduate students still working on degrees. I have any number of postdocs I'm working with. And you know, the only, as some people often say, the only difference in retirement is I won't get paid. But otherwise, I'll be doing much the same stuff. I also want another caveat. This is my own. I decided not to give slides or write something out, just make a few notes and try to speak from inside, from the heart, from what I remember. Human memory is imperfect. And I hate to tell you younger folks that it does not improve with age. So I could easily have forgotten things, gotten things wrong. My wife has already corrected me several times. That's why she's on a separate computer, so she won't be nudging me when I speak. And if anybody really, if I say something that was mistaken, I'm happy to be corrected at any time. My focus will also be on the early years because others more qualified than I can speak about the more recent history of the department. And I'll talk in 4 parts. The first, my background and why I came to be here, some of which has been already provided by Jim, how I came in the first place to be in a position to start something in epidemiology at Michigan State. And then how the initiative came about and how it was nurtured in the early days in the rather informal atmosphere in which we worked initially. And I'll be emphasizing the importance of chance and contingency. At our last faculty meeting, Gustavo pointed out that really we should do things with planning and with forethought. And that is absolutely true. But if you want to look at the history of our department, how it got started, almost everything was chance, contingency, good luck, and happenstance, to be perfectly honest. Then I'll talk a little bit briefly about the more formal development of the early years when we started to move into more like a real program/department. And then I will give some, if you'll forgive me, thoughts for the future. So my background, as Jim told you, I'm a pediatrician basically. And after that, I did an MPH in epidemiology. I got started, my career took a major turn when I was a somewhat discontented medical student at Harvard. What I was seeing was not kind of what I imagined medicine to really be about, or not entirely what it should be about. And then I saw in the catalog that Frank Spicer some of you may know the name, a giant in pulmonary disease epidemiology, was offering an elective to medical students in this esoteric discipline known as epidemiology. And Frank did an amazing thing. He took the Harvard School of Public Health introductory course in epidemiology, which takes about a whole semester to give, and he packed it into 1 month as a seminar in which he met with students 3 times a week. And we did 1 week's work on Monday and on Wednesday and on Friday, thus completing the whole course in a month. And this seminar was done with 2 students my month, myself and 1 other student. And Frank Spicer, who was then a young faculty member trying to get grants, because at Harvard you didn't survive without grants, took 9 hours a week to be with 2 students. To say that didn't make an impression on me is to minimize. And it was an extraordinary, mind-blowing experience. I loved epidemiology right from the get-go. I thought this is the kind of thinking that I really gravitate towards. We went through McMahon and Pugh almost word for word. That was the textbook of 1970. For those of you who remember that far back. But when I finished medical school, I did decide I wanted to be trained as a clinician, which was my original intent in going to medical school. So I took 4 years of residency, including the extra chief residency year at Jacobi in the Bronx, a wonderful experience, a big city hospital with some very, very wonderful people there. And after I finished my MPH, I had a year on the faculty at Columbia in general pediatrics, but then happenstance, my good fortune, luckily enough that Columbia, where I did my MPH, got an endowment from a family, a very interesting family, and they endowed something called the Sergevsky Center, which was a center for the study of the epidemiology and public health features of epilepsy and other related disorders. And Mervyn Susser, then chair of epidemiology at Columbia and director of the Sergevsky Center, hired 1 person in the adult field, Steve Schaefer, a neurologist, and 1 person in the child field, myself, to kind of get the Sergevsky Center going in 1978. And you could not ask for a better environment to grow up in. I'm very, very happy that we have a connection from Mervyn Susser and Zena Stein, this academic couple who were really the extraordinary epidemiologists at Columbia, to our department here, not just through me, but through Dawn Misra, who came just as I left Columbia in 1989 to come here, came as a student, graduate student, and she can fill you in on how wonderful it was to be with Mervyn and Zena, who are just irreplaceable people, just as both as human beings and as scientists. And so I was hired in 1978. And then Ellen was a graduate student in English, and she completed her PhD in 1979, officially 1980, and was offered a position at the University of Pennsylvania as an assistant professor. So we moved to Philadelphia, and I took the train in to New York for 8 years, from 1980 to 1988. When we moved, Rachel, our eldest, was 9 weeks old. Ellen was about to start a new job. It was a trying time, shall we say, but the commute wasn't as bad as you might think because it was uninterrupted time. There were no cell phones. There was no email. There was nothing like that. You just had your books and your journals, and we wrote grants on that and questionnaires and surveys, and you could use the time, the hour and 20 minutes it takes to go from Philadelphia to 30th Street Station to Penn Station in New York. And but I suppose you could say it wasn't ideal. Tessa was born in 1985, so we had 2 small children. And then in 1988 to 89, Ellen did a fellowship at Harvard, and I took a sabbatical with my friend Alan Leviton, longtime collaborator at Boston Children's. And during that year, we contemplated what might come next because Ellen was offered positions from several universities around the country, including the University of Arizona, the University of Texas, where we visited. I went down there, had a real fun time at Texas San Antonio, a great department of pediatrics, but it's another commute from Austin. And MSU. And when Ellen said, listen, I visited MSU and I kind of liked the place. I liked the English department, has some really good people there. And I said to myself, MSU, Magic Johnson, good football teams in the 60s. Did they have a medical school? I had no idea about MSU, none whatsoever. So I came out here, and my visit was very interesting. I basically was invited to look at pediatrics as a trailing partner. And I met with some of the shining lights in pediatrics. Mike Netzloff was then chair, Bill Weil, the former chair and founding chair, Al Sparrow, and Jane Turner, who is going to turn out to be pretty important. Jane's still in the department. And there were discussions of some role in ambulatory pediatrics, because I'm not trained as a specialist. All I know is general peds, mostly inpatient general peds, because I was my training was mostly inpatient. I should say I continued at Columbia and also in the first few years at MSU to be a clinician. I attended at Sparrow Hospital. I had a clinic in the clinical center for a few years. That eventually stopped in the mid-90s when just too many things were going on. There was talk of a possible link to the health department because of my epi training. George Baker was then a pediatrician in the health department. We talked about that. So even possibilities of a shared position between MSU and the health department. But I had really moved a lot into epidemiology, and there was no epidemiology at Michigan State University. And I had a meeting with the dean, and Ellen remembers this a little bit differently from me, but I'll tell you my version of it. She can tell you her version at some other time. I met with Don Weston, who was really an extraordinary dean. Some of you may remember him. He was a wonderful man, a great thinker, really a broad thinker. And I sat down with him and I said, you know, Dr. Weston, it's very nice. I enjoyed the people I'm meeting here in pediatrics. My wife likes the English department, but, you know, I do epidemiology now, and you don't have any epidemiology. And Don said, you're right, we don't do epidemiology, but we should do epidemiology. So how about you come here and let's do epidemiology? Now, you know, how many deans would say that? You know, talk about unplanned, just to say, let me take advantage of this guy who's coming down the pike. Maybe we can do something with this, you know? And that is the creative part of being an academic leader. I was willing to take advantage of a situation. I said, are you really serious about this? He said, yes, I'm serious. We began to talk about how many lines I might get. Didn't get a startup, but I got a commitment to hire a couple of lines because I said, you can't do epidemiology without heart disease and cancer. You've got to have those two. You got to get someone in each of those arenas. Well, why at a medical school? At Columbia, I'd had an appointment in the School of Public Health, but it was shared with the medical school. I was one of the few people who crossed that terrible line that's dividing medical schools from schools of public health. I see Mona shaking her head. She knows all about it. As these two should not be so separated. They are one. Epidemiology is important to public health. Epidemiology is important to medicine. You know, so I was attracted to the idea of trying to create epidemiology in a medical school, to create the kind of influence the medical system, that it could understand how epidemiology is basic to it as biochemistry, you know. And CHM had some appeal to me because of its community-wide distribution. It's spread out in the population, centers in Kalamazoo, then it was in those days Saginaw, Grand Rapids, Flint, of course, and also I saw an advantage that I really thought, and my University of Michigan friends, please forgive me, but because I actually did visit the University of Michigan and talked to Dave Schottenfeld, who was then chair of Epi, and he told me where they were well situated. They had Ruth Little in perinatal. We had a nice talk, but there wasn't anything there. But I could see that the University of Michigan saw itself as this great international, national university. And maybe the state of Michigan wasn't so critical to it. But if I came to Michigan State, I was right next door to Michigan, what was then called the Michigan Department of Public Health, only 6 miles away. Maybe I could leverage that relationship. And I should emphasize the importance of the health department, state health department, and also later the county health department to at least my understanding of things. I should say that at Columbia, I had developed some studies, initially of newborn intensive care, later of studies of child development in kids who had been exposed to adversities in the early life by dint of being born prematurely or small. And we did these first population-based studies using ultrasonographic imaging to look at the outcomes of premature babies. And In fact, the last 2 years of that project, the neonatal brain hemorrhage study, where I just gotten funded before I left Columbia, so I brought that over with me to MSU. And then if it was serendipity, number one, to meet with the dean who was willing to say, come on, let's do epidemiology. Serendipity number two was even more remarkable, I think, because Jane Turner, I mentioned before, in the Department of Pediatrics, is married to a Greek-born engineer, Elias Strangas. And one day in an idle conversation with the two of them, I said, I'm really looking for a graduate student who could work on my project with me, because and he said, and Elias says, I was just at the Greek club, and there's this really bright statistical graduate student named Vasilis Katsikiotis. This is how things happen in the world, no plan. So Vas comes over to the department. He's wonderful. And we begin to work together. And I say, Vas, you're in the Department of Statistics. I need someone we need really biostatistics here. I've looked at your catalog and how about so-and-so? How about so-and-so? He says, stop right there, Nigel. Stop right there. There's only one person you should talk to. Just one. I said, what's his name? He says, Joseph Gardner. Joseph Gardner. Don't talk to anyone else. Just Joseph Gardner. And immediately I reached out to him and we brought Joe over. He was still part in the Department of Statistics in the College of Natural Science, mostly in the College of Human Medicine. And let me underline this, without Joe Gardner, nothing of this would have happened. Joe is absolutely critical and central to our development. Not just because he's the kind of statistician who 4 consecutive times could get a statistical grant funded on the first cycle. Okay. How many people have done that? You could count on the fingers of one hand, I think. But because he's always open to everybody who comes into his office, from the president of the university to an undergraduate, they'll all get the same reception from Joe. How can I help you? So Joe really helped develop, I think, along with me, the department along the lines it was to go in. So we had now, we had Vas, we had Secretary Kit Machinchik. Let me emphasize the importance of staff. You cannot create an academic environment without a great staff. Kit Machinchik, who was our first secretary, the great thing, she would be on the phone. When anybody would call the department and talk to Kit first, you'd get a warm reception. You get warmth on the phone, you get intelligence on the phone, you get a willingness to help on the phone. How important is that? You can't put a price on it. And subsequent people, staff have been equally wonderful that help us develop the department in every possible way. So we had Vas, we had Joe, and then I began wondering who's going to help me. And what I did is I opened up the membership roles of the Society for Epidemiologic Research. Say, who is in town who's a member of the SCR? And I found John Canini. Who is John Canini? Turns out he's running this wonderful veterinary epidemiology program in the College of Veterinary Medicine. He became a supporter. He became involved in our teaching program. He still teaches with us after 30 plus years. Wonderful guy. And I was happy that I was able to recommend him to the membership in the American Epidemiological Society, the first, and maybe for all I know, the only veterinary epidemiologist in that august group of people. Then I encountered a guy named Howard Teitelbaum. Some of you may remember Howard in the College of Osteopathic Medicine, who had epidemiology training, and he joined us and helped teach some courses in outbreak investigation. I found Claudia Holtzman, and Claudia had done, I also encountered her work at the health department where she'd done a wonderful report on birth defect surveillance. I read it and I said, hoorah, this is really quite wonderful, thinking about birth defect surveillance. And the people at the says it's a graduate student. I said, really? Wow, got to get to know who that is. So Claudia joined us first part-time. She had the little children, Sarah and Miriam. And then eventually we were supported by grants initially, but then she eventually, we got a tenure track position. And as you know, she's grown this magnificent enterprise of research in the area of prematurity. I think one of the best programs in prematurity research in the country. And another thing that people in Flint may appreciate, our Flint friends, is that Woody Neighbors showed up one day. Now, how did that happen? So Don Williams, who was chair of psychiatry, came by and he said, listen, I've got this epidemiologic study I want to show you. And it was a study of mental illness in the prison systems. And once again, I said, who wrote this? This is great stuff. It says, oh, it's a social psychologist at Michigan named Woody Neighbors. So Woody and I began to talk, and he came to us. He thought he might become an epidemiologist. He worked with us for a year in the 90s and then said, you know, Nigel, I love being with you guys, but I'm not really an epidemiologist. I'm a social psychologist. I'm going back to U of M, and he did. And now, of course, he came to Flint, only just retired. Woody, a fantastic thinker about psychiatric illness on a population level. And then there were some people who found us, like Madeline Lenski, who came with Richard, hired from UC Irvine, and came into the office and said, I'm interested in perinatal stuff. And she, almost as soon as she came, she went off to the perinatal epidemiology research unit at Oxford to work with Ian Chalmers and those great people over there. She had done a master's at University of North Carolina and PhD work, and was going to work with Sherman James, who later came to Michigan. And Michael Collins, another figure, he was an obstetrician who was decided to do a PhD in evolutionary biology, extraordinarily bright guy. And he needed a master's degree because he realized that he wasn't making as much money as a graduate student as he had in obstetric practice in Traverse City. There was a slight diminution in his income by becoming a graduate student. And so he needed a master's degree, and he took an MS because he wanted to take the position as medical director of Grand Traverse County County Health Department. A really extraordinarily smart person. And Michael Ripp came to us. Harvey Sparks recommended him. He was a graduate student in medical geography. Again, another component of the larger view of epidemiology. And he was very helpful to us, first as a GA and later as a faculty member. So these were the kinds of informal arrangements that had been put together. And then things started to become a little more formal, I would say, when we began to look for someone to hire in cancer. And then again, good fortune landed us someone who was hired by another source. The Cancer Center hired Marie Swanson, who was a very distinguished cancer epidemiologist at the Michigan Cancer Center, now the Karamanos at Wayne State. And she joined us. And we didn't have to, pay for her because she was part of the Cancer Center. Then we also did a search and got Dorothy Patak for cancer epidemiology. Cardiovascular, we first got Ari Stein. So I don't know how many of you remember Ari, came fresh out of graduate school at Columbia with his wife, Jeannie Corval, who did infectious diseases, and they helped us get established in their fields. And then about 20 plus years ago, we put out after Ari went to Emory, we put out a search and got Matt Reeves from the health department. And he's been our mainstay in cardiovascular ever since. And in infectious diseases, Jeannie Corval was the mainstay for a while. And then Mike Collins, surprisingly, though he was an obstetrician, was really very interested in epidemic modeling. And he helped us there. And then Julie Worth, and finally Li-Jing Zhang. So those kinds of threads developed informally and then later became a bit more formalized. We also were able to hire one person in reproductive perinatal in addition to Claudia, which was Ann Sweeney, who later left to go to Texas. So in the early years, we were beginning to put together the little planks that form an epidemiology department, particularly focusing on research. And of course, the tremendous importance of our collaborations with the Department of Public Health. Some grants. We helped with some investigations that sustained us in those first years before we had enough people to go get some NIH money. And collaborations to look at whether certain kinds of prenatal care programs were helpful and things like that. And on the educational front, we began to develop our programs pretty early. In 1992, which is 3 years after we started, we opened up a master's degree program in epidemiology. We didn't have enough faculty to teach it, so it was beg and borrow from all over the university and the health department. Bill Hall helped us teach outbreak investigations, and many other people. I mentioned John Canini, Howard Teitelbaum, and many others came and participated in our teaching program to get that master's degree off the ground. And then it's an interesting feature that to initiate a master's degree in a discipline, you need to get people from across the state who are in the same discipline to say this is a good idea. And fortunately, John Masab, I'm sure many of you remember him, a great figure, chair of epidemiology at University of Michigan then, infectious disease figure, specialist. He developed the nasal flu vaccine, great guy. He wrote a very positive letter. He was very friendly to us. In fact, always the U of M people, Dave Schottenfeld, John Masab, have always been very friendly to us, not seeing us as competition, but as colleagues. And so we got the master's degree approved. Strangely enough, the PhD doesn't require any such set of letters. And we established that in 2001. Some training programs came our way. There was the TRICOS, Training Researchers in Community Settings, a K-30 program that we got in 1999, had for 6 years, trained a lot of clinicians, nurses, physicians, and others. Then we had perinatal epidemiology, as you know, from 2005 to 2015. And Jim Anthony had a lot of training programs, and Claudia had a training program for women in science and medicine. Other things, space. We started with a little bay in East Fee. Then we got a whole bay, and we were sharing the space in East Fee with OMERAD. I'm looking at Linda Beth right now. She'll remember coming into those little cubby holes we would find. She's an old timer with us. And again, OMERAD was very generous to us, didn't worry about our expansions, but eventually we got too big for it. And then, so we moved across the Hagedorn to the Ide building, and we had the entire 6th floor, and it was really a very nice arrangement. And the Ides could not have been better to us because they really wanted to rent to us, and the university was paying out of IDC. They were paying our rent, and that worked for a good long time. Everybody wanted to come to us because we had the best parking in the university. You could park anywhere. So, can we do a conference in your conference room, Nigel? I said, who are you guys? That doesn't matter. Just we want to use your conference room because we're the good parking. So we accommodated a lot of people, and then eventually the university got tired of paying rent. Not surprisingly, they figured they could hang on to the IDC if they could give us only space. So the 6th floor of Westfeed became available. It had been a laboratory. It had been Justin McCormick's laboratory, cancer laboratory, and it was completely redesigned. And here again, we come to staff. Ann Smith, Jerry Zolkowski, they redesigned it so that the idea would have, instead of one corridor in the middle, 2 corridors, so that every office would have windows, and you'd put the meeting rooms in the center, which was actually the way it was at Ide. And that's, you know, it took some effort to persuade the university to invest in that, but it worked. And we got that suite on the 6th floor, and then we got the other side of the 6th floor, which we weren't able to renovate. So it still has 1 corridor, but we got enough space to work with. And as you know, with the National Children's Study, we're able to expand to the 2nd floor downstairs with university help. When did we become a department? We were a program under the dean's office until 1998. And then in 1998, we went to the trustees. There had been some discussion with John Canini and the veterinary people about possibly going in together, but I think the veterinary program treasured its independence and its way of doing things. So we went in alone to become a department, and you had to meet with the trustees, and they had some harsh questions. What benefit would you have by becoming a department? It's actually an important question. Well, departments are the locus for courses. They're the locus for faculty appointments. And you had to convince them of that and how much better it would be to recruit people if you were a department than just a program. And that, in fact, is what happened. They approved that, and we became a department. We had a really nice celebration. I remember Walt Willett coming. Some of you may know the name Walter Willett, probably the most published and cited epidemiologist in the world. He's at Harvard. He is an MSU grad. He feels very strong ties to MSU, grew up here. His father taught in the university. His mother taught school in Okemos. Great guy, and he's been here, visited us, and he visited us when we became a department, along with Myron Wegman, the former dean at the School of Public Health at Michigan. I think Dave Schottenfeld was here, the chair of epidemiology at Michigan at one time, Betsy Foxman. So we had a really quite nice moment when we became a department. And then what about financial issues? Now, finances are interesting. I see some of our financial people. We had great leadership from Anne. Tina Monroe still continues to help us with financial issues, and we have many others more recently than that. But it's an interesting fact that we have no money except salary lines. So what we do is people who are on salary go on grants, and then they generate salary savings, and we use that to buy every stick of furniture that you see on the 6th floor. There's never been a budget for a chair or a table or anything or a book. It's all coming from salary savings. In fact, all our staff is paid out of salary savings. So this was a system the fact that we had hard money, which was no small matter, hard money for faculty lines, it's really an attraction when you try to hire people. But we use that, we generate the other parts of the program income that is necessary from that hard money. Okay, so that's the early history of how I've already taken a half an hour, I can see, and I would like to leave room for discussion. I see, and I'm so tempted, I see so many friends here. I see Ting Hong Q, my good students from the past, haven't seen in a long time, and there are probably others that I'm not seeing right now. Kendall Sisla, who is so wonderful in the National Children's Studies, Steve Kozanowski, I should have mentioned you, John Gutierrez, who we worked with on our international studies, everybody, these wonderful people. Hi, Diana. And I can't mention all the names because I can't even see all of you, but thank you for being here. So let's talk about a little bit how I see the future. I think a key element of coming here was that epidemiology is not public health. It is a component of public health. It is also a component of medicine. So public health, I think of it as a goal. Medicine is a goal. It's not a discipline. There's no discipline called medicine or public health. Disciplines form medicine, form public health. And those disciplines are really very important. And the names of departments are very important. And I'll tell you a story. I had been here a couple of years when I got a phone call from John Cantlon. Again, the old timers remember that name. He was longtime VP for research and graduate studies. John Cantlon, very highly respected gentleman. I don't know what his discipline was. It seemed like he had been forever in that position. He calls me up and he said, "Hey, Nigel, I'd like it. How about I propose to you that you change the name of your program from epidemiology to epidemiology and public health?" I said, "Well, why would you want to do that, John?" He said, "I want to hold on to the public health franchise." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Microbiology was then called microbiology and public health." Now, this may surprise contemporary people, but in fact, it was microbiology and public health. They did a lot of good public health work. The Lansing, of the 3 strains of poliovirus used in the vaccine, one is called the Lansing strain. Why is it called the Lansing strain? Because it was identified by the Department of Microbiology faculty from a kid who died, sadly, a teenager of polio in the 1950s. So they really did do public health-oriented microbiology, but they had moved away. They wanted to change the name to microbiology and molecular genetics. And they wanted to drop public health because they kept getting letters from people saying, "I want to do an MPH with you guys." And they had no idea what an MPH was. So they wanted to drop it, but John Cantlon said, "I don't want to lose the franchise entirely to Michigan." But truth be told, I was at that time, so interested in maintaining the concept of epidemiology. I didn't want it to be diluted. Public health is kind of broad and vague. And next thing you know, they're saying, "This ex-football coach, he knows something about public health. Can we put him in your department?" I'd have to say, put him in biochemistry. Well, he doesn't know any biochemistry. Well, he doesn't know any epidemiology either. So, you had to maintain the discipline. And I'll tell you another story. When I was at Columbia, I represented the School of Public Health in the faculty group that was at the medical complex, medical center, medical school. And one day, the Department of Biochemistry came by and said, "We want to change the name of our department to Biochemistry and Biophysics." So I'm sitting there saying, well, if they want to change their name to biochemistry and biophysics, who am I to say anything? But no, physiology got up and said, now wait just a moment. You can't do that. We do biophysics also. This may resonate a little bit in the present time. So biochemistry and physiology were both claiming the discipline called biophysics. So who won? I'll tell you how it came out. The Department of Biochemistry called itself the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biophysics. The Department of Physiology renamed itself the Department of Physiology and Cellular Biophysics. We love this tiny little distinctions, but they're important. They mean things. You can't steal biophysics from one department. You can't take epidemiology from one department and put it in another. You have to maintain the franchise. So the words, the names of the disciplines count. And as we consider how we rename things, public health, epidemiology, we have to make sure that we're not overlapping and not all encompassing. We know what the purpose of each thing is. And I think that whatever the medical school resolves in terms of its naming issues, I think we have to recognize that epidemiology and biostatistics are a component of public health. So we have to have a name that suggests that both units, the one in Flint and the one here, are converging towards the same goal, but have recognizable distinctions among them. And public health goals, it was important. We built in to our tenure recommendations or criteria for tenure that the work be of public health significance of the faculty member. It's not just, as I said, as I was quoted by Jim saying, it's not just for our own entertainment that we do this research. We do this research to improve the health of the public. And if we forget that, we've forgotten what epidemiology is all about. So that continues to be an important goal, and we have to keep that strongly in mind. And that had a lot to do with our collaboration with the health department, which continues to this day. And actually, as collaboration is so critical. You can't do anything by yourself or by alone. There was mention made of our little historical interlude, our work on the John Snow book, which was a wonderful experience. Consider that the 5 authors came from the Department of English, the Department of History, a medical geographer in our department, a philosopher in the Department of Family Practice, and an epidemiologist. Where could you put? Michigan State has, that was really something you couldn't do in many places. You couldn't have done it at Columbia, where the medical school is, a subway ride away from the main campus. We were able to pull it together on campus, and we did this really quite wonderful excursion, you might say, from our daily duties into this project to describe the life of John Snow. And I'm very proud of that effort that I think is really an MSU effort. And then collaborations for research, such as the what was initially called the MANCS Alliance, the Michigan Alliance for the National Children's Study, established in 2002, established before the RFA came out, actually 5 years before the RFA came out. We knew something was going to happen. We said, let's get a coalition together. Let's be a pretty strong Midwestern center. So we put together, it was really initially Bob Sokol of Wayne State and myself who worked hardest on this, and we brought in Michigan, Henry Ford, and very importantly, again, the Michigan Department of then Public Health, then Community Health, now Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And just a little anecdote about that. During the National Children's Study, which we did in which the health department was our collaborator, someone called me from Texas and said, Nigel, how do you figure out how many people live, how many births are in your county? I said, how do you figure out how many births in your county? You got to go to your health department and you look at birth certificates. And they say, well, they won't talk to me and they want money. And I don't know who they are. And they say, I can give you data from 3 years ago. And I say, I just want you to know that our Michigan Department of Community Health is our participant, is an absolutely regular component of our research. And on January the 20th of 2012, the great people in the health department in vital statistics, Glenn Copeland, can tell me on January 20th, the births in Wayne County in 2020, in the year before, in 2011. And that was true. And so if you make the health department your partner, you can do so many more things that you couldn't do otherwise. And we still work very, very closely with the health department in the ECHO program, which is the successor to the National Children's study, which still has the same alliance. We now call it CHARM. Child's health depends upon researching mothers, and that's been our focus: pregnancy recruitment and follow-up. And now I'm excited there might be new possibilities in working with someone with Henry Ford, who we have worked with since 2002, since Chris Johnson joined our alliance back then and participated with us in the National Children's Study, participates with us in the current ECHO program. And I'm hopeful that we will, again, think of some really creative ways to collaborate in the new, whatever is being created with Henry Ford. Okay, I'll finish off by giving some thoughts about how you run organizations in the academy, and argue that running a unit in the academy is not the same as running a business or running a law practice or running. Every single form of organization has its own constraints, its own things that it does well, the things it doesn't do so well. And I think people saying you guys ought to apply a business model to your universities, I think they're barking up the wrong tree. We need to figure out in universities what's the right model for universities. It's not the same as a business. After all, we're not out to make a profit. If we did, we might do things quite differently. So I've thought that in departments or any other unit, and I've had experience also in the dean's office. I was associate dean for research for a few years. There are three components of what you have to do, and I call them administration, management, and leadership. And administration is making sure that everything is done right, the finances are right, the regulatory aspects are right, things are done on time. And for this, you need, and what we've always been fortunate to have, you need a great staff. We've had a fantastic staff over the years. It's never been less than superb, really. And thanks to that great staff, we've not had to worry about whether the department is well administered. It's always been very well administered. Management to me means how you work with people. And working with people is much more essential in the academy than it is in business, because we don't give orders. I can only work with Mona if she wants to work with me. I can't tell Mona, why don't you do this? Impossible. No, research cannot be directed. You do what people want to do. You're free agents in a university. And that's why the business model so often fails in a university. So management consists largely of talking to people, finding out what they're interested in, what they're good at, what role they want to fulfill. Everybody has a role to play. I haven't found very much, bad actors, good actors. I found people who are in the wrong place sometimes. Find the right place for them and they'll be helpful people. So management is really about working with people, working with your colleagues, working with students, recognizing what other people need to do and what their needs are, and then working with them. And then leadership simply means, I think, setting a vision, having the big picture, making sure that people know what the direction is, where you're headed for, what the point of all of this is, and not to lose sight of that at any point in time. Okay, I think I've taken 44 minutes according to my clock, and I've just talked myself out. And if I've left anything out, please forgive me. And if I said something wrong, forgive me again. And I would love to hear from anybody who wants to say anything at all right now, but it's been a joy to see so many faces. Oh my goodness, 104 participants. I can't believe that. And so many names, blast from the past and from the present. And it's just a pleasure to see so many good people. Thanks very much for listening.
Nigel, that was great. Thank you so much. Applause, folks. A standing ovation if we were in the same room. So I'm going to kick things off with just one question and then ask for some participation from students, from faculty, from friends, family. I think we have time, and if we run over a little bit past one, I don't think anyone will complain very much. Nigel, will you be able to do that?
Sure.
Okay, great. So the question I'd like to ask has to do with the pie and the PI meetings. And I wonder if you'd like to talk a little bit about the PI and the PI meetings in that context.
Yeah, PI stood for Program in Epidemiology. And because it made a nice acronym, we never dropped it. Even when we became a department, we wouldn't want to call it DI. That's no good. So PI was good. And the idea was that we met faculty and staff together, which is unusual in the academy. You normally have a faculty meeting and a staff meeting. So we used to always meet together. And then sometimes the faculty would, if they had some things that would be very boring to staff, like student advancement, we would meet separately afterwards. But I think that was key. I mean, I think that's, you bring everybody's part of the picture. There's nobody who doesn't contribute, You leave the office in the evening and you see the guy who's cleaning the floors and you thank him because he's a participant too. Everybody participate and helps you move forward, So I think it was very important to have staff and faculty understanding each other, understanding their mutual needs, what they wanted to do. Everybody has something to contribute.
Thank you. Ellen, do you want to say anything? You have to unmute. Yes, Ellen. You're still
looking
mute.
for her mute. She's found it.
I got it. I did it. Really just that I found it so moving to listen to that whole history and be reminded of all the people, and it's great. He's really great at what he does.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You all know.
Yes.
So now I'm finished and I'm going to cry. So.
Now, are you in Williamston now or are you in Vermont?
No, I'm upstairs. He's downstairs. He just didn't want me correcting him because we remember things so differently.
I got you. Okay. Professor English, would you like to say anything?
Where are you?
I'm on my house at River Terrace in East Lansing. 12 minutes walk from the office that I can't get into. Professor English, you need to unmute yourself.
I am unmuted. Thanks for inviting me. Nigel, I loved hearing the story also. And I've heard some of that story before, but much of it I haven't heard. Out of all the good things that Nigel did, one of the bad things that he did was he helped recruit me to MSU, so you can blame him for that. Nigel, for some reason, you were not on my list of people to meet during my first visit to Lansing, but your friend and my friend, John Tyson, at the University of Texas in Houston, had told me, well, if you're going to go to MSU, you need to look up Nigel and chat with him and find out what's really going on there. So as I recall, we met at Dusty's after work over a beer. And despite what you told me, I came anyway. So here I am. So, Nigel, you've really been an inspiration to me. Thank you for your leadership and for really providing a great role model for our young faculty. As I try to convince more people to see the big picture and think about how epidemiology really should be part of everything we talk about. I just wrote a little blurb earlier about One Health for our friends at the Institute for Global Health, and thinking that through. I'm pretty sure I used the word epidemiology about 5 times in my brief commentary about how things are connected together. So thank you, Nigel, for all that you've done.
Yeah. Keith, we're really happy to have you here as our chair of pediatrics. It's really important. And your vision has really been very coherent with all that we've been trying to do. And Mona knows that too. So we're in a good position in child health, I think.
So I'd like to have staff have a chance to say a few words, but I don't want to put you on the spot. So I'll give you a minute. I have a hand raised from Professor De Los Campos.
Hey. Yeah, so thank you very much, Nigel, for this very nice seminar. I want to share an experience. I started my academic career in the University of Alabama, Birmingham, medical center, very different model than MSU. And in terms of governance of the department, also very different model, much more vertical. And when I came here about 5 years ago, I found a model that was extremely collegial where, all the important decisions were addressed by the faculty, and I really felt this is home for me. This is where I want to be. And I want to thank you very much for contributing to develop that model. Sometimes I think we are seen as different within the college for having this more, if you want to say traditional academic model. We of course need to thank Claudia, Jim, and Matt for contributing to continue to develop that model. And I just wanted to tell you that for me, it was always very important. And I want you to, I don't know if you want to reflect on that, whether this was something that came naturally to you or was something that was deliberate, and what, if any, recommendations you may have going forward.
I would say that I've never been comfortable with hierarchy and authority. It caused me a little bit of a problem occasionally, especially when I was a medical student. So the idea of a vertical arrangement has never been congenial to me. I worked with Mervyn Susser and Zena Stain. As Dawn can tell you, there were no more open people, open and thoughtful and open to every idea that you can imagine than those two. And when I first came here, I used to always think, how would Mervyn have solved this problem? Because he was my role model. And those of you who know Mervyn Susser or his work will know what I'm talking about. What an extraordinary figure he was in my past, along with Frank Spicer, who was no small influence upon me either. And I just saw a note a little bit from Jim, and it really resonates. Joseph C. Gardner, you are such an important person to this department. Can you give us a few of your reflections?
I'll be glad to. First, I should say that I met Nigel in 1989, and he presented a problem to me on interval sensing. That's right. I thought it was a bunch of nonsense. I thought it was something nobody's interested in. And then he tells me, oh, this is what most epidemiologists and even medical researchers, including someone from England, I remember, do this. And I told him, I'll be back in about a week and give you my opinion. And my life was changed after that. I found not only is statistics important, but it is useful for others. As Nigel mentioned, I had my first grant was from the Office of Naval Research, and then I had an NIH grant. And then the reviews are coming in. I was being funded, but the reviews coming in. In fact, one poignant comment by a reviewer, he said, this guy plays chess with himself. He does not talk to anybody else. So Nigel showed me the pathway, really. I've always referred to him as Moses. He led me out from the darkness into the light. And my life has really been changed quite a bit. And most importantly, when I got to epidemiology in 1990, and I met Ken Rosenman.
Yes, Ken.
Smith came later. So I was working with all these brilliant brains, and then I realized that you can make a life out of logistic regression. You can really make a lot of money out of logistic regression. So we were able to do a lot of things, lots of projects within the department, across the university. And Nigel was always there to make sure that I was keeping the subject matter in mind and not just throwing a lot of mathematics into the mix so that nobody would understand what's going on. So thank you very much. It was it's a great thing for me, as well as the students that we trained, as Katsakotis, Wang, and then Dr. Aras came in. A lot of these folks ended up working with us, and then they got very good positions in industry and in academia. And in fact, we have, you remember, Jose Rabar, who was with us for a while, and now he's in Texas. So they've done very well. And I see Ting here. Ting was always in my office and asking me this question and that question. I said, why don't you look it up? And I remember Ting telling me, why don't you tell me? Because you already know it.
I have to tell the Ting story. Ting Hong comes to my office. She's just starting the graduate program. And I said, Ting, why do you especially want to work with me? And she said, well, because you're the extinguished professor. and you know, we just loved it. I just roared with laughter, of course. And look, is that Olivia? Oh my goodness. And
this is Hannah.
Hannah, that's your younger daughter, right? Oh, wonderful. And then Ting, initially she was a little abashed that she had done the wrong thing, but she managed to write a beautiful essay about it, which won an award from the International Center at MSU about part of the experience of coming and recognizing the culture. And it was really wonderful to have Ting, who worked so closely with Madeline and myself on a number of projects as a graduate student, is now at the University of Washington.
Thank you. I see hands raised from Dorothy Patek and from Kevin Brooks.
I would like to comment how serendipitous my coming to MSU was. It was kind of like Joe's comment about playing chess with himself. When my grant was reviewed, the breast cancer in Polish migrant women, it was initially submitted from University of New Mexico, where I was on faculty. And of course, a very wise reviewer wrote, how can you conduct that study from New Mexico when your study sites are Chicago and Detroit? So I decided to apply to, at that time, to Michigan State, which had an opening. And I was fortunate to hire, and I moved without having the grant funded yet, but to increase the chances of it being funded. And sure enough, by 1997, the grant was funded. And talk about serendipity. Yes, thank you. And it was Nigel and Bill Wandland that brought me on into this department. So it has been an amazing journey of 26 years. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So I've got Madeline Lenski, Brad Halle, and Ting queued up, but first Kevin Brooks.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. I just very briefly want to say thank you very much, Dr. Paneth. Talk about chance, contingency, and good luck. I think I'm a combination of all three permutations. And for you to have made it possible for someone from Jamaica with a background in computer science to now be in epidemiology, it's indeed amazing. And I want to thank you, not just for your academic guidance and your support, but for your care and your kindness and your compassion. You remember that you made it possible for me to have my first car in the US.
I remember you and Kaylin buses on you took it away. You guys.
Anyone on this call who want to buy me a beer after, I can tell you stories about that car. But thank you so very much, Dr. Paneth. And you're such a kind and caring and compassionate person. And I myself and my family, we owe it all to you. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Kevin, that's very kind of you to say, but it's always a matter of you looking, and I hope I have one talent. It's like to spot, maybe you call them diamonds in the rough, or people who haven't yet quite gotten there. The key thing, it's always easy to identify a star, but you have to identify them when they're still a little semi-nova. And Kevin was working with Maureen Sams Vaughan in Jamaica, and when we were doing our projects, our international study that Madeline will remember very well, and international studies of low birth weight outcomes. And Maureen told me Kevin is a keeper. If he wants to apply to your department, I said, okay. Maureen says he's good. He's going to be good, and he was good. And we're very pleased that he decided to come to join us in epidemiology, get his degree with us, and continue to work at Michigan State. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
We have three hands up, and I'm going to go in order: Madeline, Rayed, and then Ting. We'll have you close it off. I want you to know, according to the Zoom, the chat is being recorded. So if you have thoughts you'd like to pass on and don't want to raise your hand or stick around after we finish, please use the chat. So Madeline, please.
Thank you, Jim. This has been such a marvelous occasion, Nigel, to hear about the department history and to see so many wonderful old and new faces here. But I did want to follow up on your statement about the diamonds in the rough. First of all, you were instrumental in helping Richard and I decide to come to MSU when we first were contemplating. Spoke to a friend of mine, Lou Margolis, and told him we were thinking about MSU, and I knew nothing about it there. So to find to talk with you before, and as far as the many little gems along the way in mentoring, but one of them that I really remember is
oh dear.
We break it up. I think we lost her.
Zoom does its magic.
Madeline.
I'm
you're back?
I'm back. Sorry, that was very inopportune time. But anyway, just remembering that in some of our research meetings, you would say, a new idea is like a baby. That was very much in your pediatrician mode, to say that you can't kind of grasp what it is right away. You have to let it develop. And I always appreciated your openness to the fact that you needed some time around ideas to figure out what would work and what wouldn't, among the many gems that you've given us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to add a little comment to that. I got it from someone else, but the idea is you can't expect an infant to run. It hasn't even learned to walk yet. The same is true of ideas. And suppression of good ideas at the beginning is one of the great crimes of the academy. I've had it done to me more than once, and when I was younger. And I think the key thing is to always encourage the ideas first. If they're not going to work, they're not going to work. But just encourage them at the beginning. That's so critically important. And let me say, as I see names come up, Ken Rosenman, critically important figure here for many years in occupational epidemiology, occupational health. I want to thank him. I see Mark and Linda. Well, where would we be without Mark and Linda? We probably wouldn't have this Zoom meeting if it wasn't for Mark and Linda, who have been Correct. The mainstay for 25 years or more of the backbone of the computer infrastructure of our department. I can't thank them enough. And there are probably many other people I've forgotten to thank, but people, please don't be offended if I haven't mentioned your name, because you're all extremely valuable.
Thank you. Red, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I just want to say that, thank you, Dr. Paneth, for all your help and guidance and support, especially during the last 2 years. You're a wonderful, great, generous person who always doesn't say no if anybody approaches you. And I just want to say that I'm a second-generation PhD student here at MSU. My dad graduated in 1989 with Dr. Kanini. He was the first PhD student in epidemiology to graduate from MSU.
Right.
So,
right.
I'm following his path, and I just want to say, Dr. Paneth, you have been like an inspiration for everyone, and good luck with everything that. And good luck in your retirement. And I hope you're gonna enjoy your time. But I know you're not gonna quit working, because you will never do.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you.
Art Ting, you have the last word.
Hi, Dr. Paneth. It's been, so I left MSU 2008. It's been 13 years.
Wow.
And sorry if I'm gonna cry. But I have almost forgotten how delightful, how enjoyable it is to listen to you. And it's great that Madeline sent me this link so I can be in today's Zoom. And I can agree more with Alan about people remembering things differently. So I'd like to correct you that when I told you about you were the extinguished faculty, that actually happened in Madeline's office. And so both of you were like, whoa. And then after I explained, I realized, oh, what a stupid mistake I made. But thank you and Madeline and Joe Gartner, Dr. Gartner, for covering me under your wings for the almost 8 years I have spent in Michigan State. That is the best year of my life, no doubt about it. I had the best mentor that I can ever find in this world. I'm very blessed and very honored. And, I'm speechless. I can't find any better words to give you, but I hope you feel how I feel. It's really honored to be your student and to be a student that you really like. Let's just put it that way.
I must tell another Ching Hong story. It's slightly different. I'm on the phone with NIH because we have a grant, we have a trial. There's a thyroid, first phase 1 trial of thyroid hormone. And we have a data analysis center. And I'm trying to keep from NIH, so the data analysis center, this massive center, is Ting Hong, 20 hours a week. And they're saying to me, Nigel, when we have these big contracts with these major data centers around the country at Georgetown, they have 10 or 15 people working, but we never get results as quickly as we get from your data center. What's the secret to your data center? I said, the secret is Ting Hong. That's the data center. Outperforming these big outfits because she just knew what the question was. She'd do the graphics. She'd show things in a visually appealing way. And NIH would say, oh, wow, that's great. Thank you, Ting Hong. Thank you.
I probably don't deserve that nice comment, but we're working with you and Dr. Gardner and Dr. Lagama on the thyroid trial that actually helped me, for my, landing my jobs at University of Washington. I worked there for 8 years on HIV trials, and then I spent 2 years at Fred Hutch to continue on the HIV trials. Now I actually switched to industry. Dr. Gardner and Zhehui, you will be laughing. I'm actually officially working as a biostatistician, which I totally don't think I deserve. But anyway, it was the best years of my life at Michigan State. I consider it my second home simply because you, Madeline, and Dr. Gardner made it made it possible for me. It was the best.
Thank you.
That's great. Actually, I see that Richard Lenski has unmuted himself. Richard, do you have something you want to add?
No, I don't. I must have just clicked it accidentally, other than I had said just so many people were commenting what a wonderful friend and human being you are. And so it's just been a pleasure to know you and share a little bit of fun discussing old books. We both like old science and other books, and just to be a part of this and hear your recollections was fantastic.
Well, I'm glad I called on you. So this is, I think, a good time then to round this out. And please do use the chat, and we can keep a recording of that and share it. Nigel, our original plan was to have this about a week away, or maybe at the end of this week, and to let more alums know that you are going to be talking. So we're going to share the recording with them, but I'm hopeful that you might be able to have a reprise with us sometime, maybe in the fall when we have a more gala event. But we can get a chance for you to talk to your former students and other alums, many who took Epi 810 from you when they were being introduced to epidemiology, and let others participate in the activity, because this Zoom pandemic is a strange experience, but there's no reason that we can't applaud and recognize you for all of your contributions.
Thank you very much, Jim. It's a pleasure to talk to everyone and a pleasure to hear from you, and great to see everybody. It's really moving for me too. Terribly moving. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks for doing it.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Hey, take care.